And I think we are live. What's up, everybody? Crypto Hedge here with none other than Jack Mullers, the Lightning Network's ZAP wallet creator, and also someone who works closely with Charlie Lee, the creator of Litecoin. It's nice to have you, Jack.
Thanks for having me back, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Once again, we have you on the show to talk about some awesome updates for not only Litecoin, but for Lightning Network. I know that you work close with Lightning Network, right?
I do. I've been following specifically LND and Lightning Labs for well over a year now, and then more closely the other implementations too. So it's where I like to spend my time.
Yeah, well, you do this like basically full time. I know like the market's been slow and whatnot, but what have you been working on, or what have you been focusing on in relation to like cryptocurrency?
Yeah, sure. So I watch the price every day like everyone else, but as time has gone on, I've been fortunate enough to spend more and more of my time developing Lightning stuff. And we're just trying to get people onboarded onto the network at ZAP. So just a community of people that want to focus at the application layer, specifically wallet services right now, and just making sure that consumers and large merchants and enterprises and people can get onboarded onto this new layer and use it with familiar screens, familiar interfaces, things that everyone's already accustomed to. So just kind of that infrastructure type of stuff, so that the next layer, this Lightning layer, can really blossom over the next 12 to 24 months.
Yeah, I mean, I know that everyone says that Lightning Network is going to take years to develop, and it's so hard to understand. And it's hard to work with. I know they've been saying that since the 90s with email and the new internet boom, but I guess people just need to get used to it, and they need a better understanding of it. And how do you think like you're going to get people to get on board with this new layer that's so complex?
Mm-hmm. I mean, to be honest with you, like the internet still has its complexities today, even, although it's drastically changed the world and many businesses have made lots of money on top of it, right? Like with these protocols, it's a bit irresponsible to think of them as products and think of them with like timely launch dates and, very packaged solutions where you can look back from this moment in time and understand that it's very black and white, like the world has officially changed. And that's just unfortunately not the case with these protocols, right? Like Lightning has certain value propositions that are very important. It's really unclear how exactly it will change the world and when and in what order. But, every single day it improves the, developer resources, the developer community, lines of code, the outreach, the onboarding, the infrastructure, all this stuff improves. And similar to Bitcoin, it's very easy now for us to look back, at 2009, since the first block and go, wow, have we changed the world and we're onto something. But along the way, you can never really pick a date and go, this is when it launched and this is when it was real, right? It's just been this kind of gradual network effect. And the same will be for Lightning as the internet analogies go. So that's kind of my broader opinion is in a few years, we'll look back and be like, man, we're really changing the way, payments are sent digitally with the Lightning Network. But right now it's really unclear. It's just a day-to-day, grind to, push all this stuff forward, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess cryptocurrencies in general are kind of vague to the general public. But when you add Lightning Network as an improvement or a progressive development to just cryptocurrencies in general, it just blows people's minds. It throws them off. But I think it's just like you said, it's like a progressive learning experience for not even just people that are involved in cryptocurrency, but also people that are working the back end, coding this. I think that it's just constant learning, constant progression. And then I think what will come with that is the better comprehension and understanding of how this works and how it would work in today's society.
100%.
Yeah. So, I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, so Lightning Network got implemented. I think it's the Lightning Network mainnet beta release just happened recently, right? Was that for Bitcoin or Litecoin or both?
So they're both supported, and it is a specific implementation that was ready for mainnet and would like to invite mainnet testers. You've probably seen like on Twitter and stuff, there were a bunch of mainnet graphics previously. And the truth is that like all of this stuff is free and open source, right? There's no CEO to tell anyone what to do. So those that wanted to self-configure for mainnet have been on mainnet for a while. But this release kind of marked the start of, there were safety features and, security stuff implemented that needed to be to protect users and for responsible engineering purposes. And this kind of marked the start of, the birth and growth of the Lightning Network as we know it on, the main Bitcoin blockchain and Litecoin blockchain. So it was a really big deal and a really big milestone for specifically Lightning Labs, that's their implementation. Not all implementations are mainnet ready as far as I'm aware. But yeah, I mean, I have nothing but good things to say about Lightning Labs. That's Elizabeth Stark and Roast Beef are the co-founders. They are great. I've been testing their software for over a year now. So it was definitely a cool milestone. It's kind of like the birth of what we hope becomes like a really cool and like world-changing network, obviously.
Yeah, of course. I mean, for us crypto people, it's like a moon landing, but for cryptocurrency, it's like a huge accomplishment.
Right.
Yeah. So, so beta release was just recently implemented. And it seems like the Lightning Network team is taking things really slow. Like they're making sure that the product is perfected before putting it out there. Because I know that Lightning Network's been around for a while and people were able to test it. But just recently it's become more official, right?
Yeah. I mean, like the speed of things, I guess, depends on the lens of who's looking, right? Like if the price was instead going from 8K to 20K right now, would we be going slow or fast? We'd probably be going like blazing fast and you can't believe the price is climbing with all this innovation. But as like we're slowly leaking in the market and kind of retracing and finding our feet, speculators are getting anxious and getting worried, and maybe some of the protocol developments that are happening in the space seem to be slow. I think that the pace is shockingly fast, considering that there's only like 10 full-time developers working on the protocol. A lot of the work going on in the infrastructure and application level are, in people's free time, like ZAP contributors and the such. I think it's going extremely fast. But as far as its progress to like a really official stable network, yeah, it's definitely getting there. I mean, businesses can start accepting it now. There's a lot of steps we have to take still, and I don't know if it's clear to people before this stuff is real consumer facing. So for example, the ZAP wallet, we do not have a mainnet release yet on purpose. There's no mobile releases yet on purpose. This is all command line stuff. So still like fairly tailored towards, the technically savvy and, the real contributors in this community that understand the nitty gritty. But, you can, as a business, operate on it, and as a consumer, opt to use this network to make digital purchases, which is, a really, really big deal in the history of mankind, if you zoom out far enough.
No, definitely. This is game changing. I mean, people underestimate how huge this is. And like you were saying, the market is slow right now. And I think it's slow because so many people came into this market not really knowing what they're getting into, and they got in because of the price action and there's money to be made. But from a technical standpoint, like a development standpoint, I think that it's progressing extremely fast. I mean, we can't even keep up every single day. I mean, it's like a full-time job keeping up with the developments of some of these things that are going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, I like to think of the market sometimes. I mean, I'm no expert trader like yourself, but I try sometimes. But I mean, I like to think of it sometimes when it gets too out of whack and the growth is too accelerated. I like to think it's like retracing. It follows its averages of education. Is like the money that inflows when we get too out of whack with those that don't really understand what they're buying and why this stuff is valuable and why, the potential growth way outweighs the risk, then we kind of like have a paid education session, learning session, where everyone pays a little bit of money, whether that's losing money in BitConnect, losing money in an alt, buying Bitcoin at 20,000. And, those that stay around, get educated, become strong hands. But in my opinion, that's kind of what's happening. And a lot of those people that entered the market are now like helping testing Lightning Network, helping testing ZAP, right? The community itself and the growth of devs and participants is going, parabolic. The price will follow eventually for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to look at it. I think, like you said, people were getting in not knowing anything about cryptocurrency just to make a dollar. But then you have all walks of life getting into this industry from every career, and they're finding interest in this industry, cryptocurrency, a new booming industry where they can actually contribute and learn from the actual market, although they're not making money or they lost money, they're already kind of addicted. I mean, cryptocurrencies are extremely addictive.
Oh, 100%.
For interest,
You come for the online casino Lambo, but you stay for the simple reason that what else would you rather be spending your time on and, doing that would impact the world at such a global scale?
Yeah, you come for the Lambo, stay for the revolution.
Absolutely. There it is.
Yeah. So, so I mean, I know a while back you were telling me about how, I don't know if you said this, it might have been you, it might have been someone else, but you thought maybe the implementation of Lightning Network or something like that might change the market sentiment right now because, the market is slow. I mean, there's not a lot of price action, there's not a lot of volume. I think that people are not even thinking about price anymore. Like you said, they're focusing on the developments and whatnot and actual solid projects. Did you think that the market was going to change in a money perspective when the Lightning Network was going to get released, or do you think that in the near future that it could possibly do that?
Absolutely. I'm very bullish, but as an investor, not as a trader. So this is not trading advice, but as someone who owns this stuff and prefers to store value in it over, long-term time frames, right? Like 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. I'm very, very bullish. I think that things like the Lightning Network, but there's a whole plethora of development going on, right? Like I said before, the contributors to this ecosystem, whether that be participants of just hodling, developers, businesses, investors, I mean, that stuff is going absolutely parabolic. So long term, I'm very bullish. I think something like the Lightning Network can have a very, positive impact on price. I think institutional money has been paying attention and will continue to. And in particular to the Lightning Network, when you think about this type of like moonshot image we all have of mainstream adoption, people walking around with a ZAP wallet or whatever and scanning for coffee, that's becoming almost a reality, right? Like we can start to envision some of the stuff. We can start to grow that network and, build applications on top of it. And I think that'll be a big deal. The fact that Bitcoin can become consumer facing and it won't be this real cypherpunk ethos, black screen, green text, terminal type of feel, and it'll be a consumer, Jack Dorsey involved, those type of people, mainstream audience will start to get to know it well. So I'm very bullish on all of that stuff, of course.
Yeah, like you said, like your everyday person, your average person will be able to utilize something like this. And I think every single day we start to envision more and more into the future and how it's actually starting to happen now, where people are getting a better understanding of this and how it actually could benefit us immensely when we're processing payments and stuff like that. So, moving forward, so your thoughts on the market in general, just very bullish. You're not a trader. You're more so a long-term investor, which I myself am the same way. I look at the long-term picture, how this is actually going to be a huge revolution in humanity. What do you think of the market for like the rest of the year? Because, Bitcoin at the end of last year, like I think it was in December, topped out at like $20,000. It was crazy mania, a lot of hype going around. A lot of scams were in the market too, which luckily the scams are dying down now. But do you think personally that Bitcoin would be breaking into a new all-time high sometime this year? Or do you see the market more so moving sideways for the remainder of the year?
I do think that it will break a new all-time high this year. I obviously could be wrong, but I don't think that this ecosystem is I think the fundamentals are just too strong to sustain, a substantially long bear market and a slow bleed. You never know, like if there's pending regulation or if there's some form of hack or huge ecosystem disruptive event. Those are really hard to predict. Exactly. But I really believe that this market is a different beast. I have been around since early 2013, so I was there. I was a young gun and didn't really know what I was doing, but I was there for the Gox. I was there for that bleed. I was there for the Mike Hearn stuff. I was there for it all, and it's a totally different feel now. The people that are starting to get involved both at the financial level with financial instruments like futures market, the CME, SIBO, talks of ETF approvals, and then also on the development side where not only are you getting, more and more protocol developers and, university and education research going on at the protocol level, but also now this consumer layer where we're getting developers building applications. We're getting investors such as Jack Dorsey, like legendary Silicon Valley consumer level people. I really don't think that this market can last in a slow bleed. There's too much going on. And listen, if Bitcoin, it's very binary, right? Like if Bitcoin works, it's going to be a big deal and it's going to be worth a lot of money. And if it doesn't, then it's going to go to zero. But there's no in between. I really don't think it can last in no man's land for too long. It's either revolutionary technology or it was a worthwhile experiment, Yeah.
I mean, this market's very black and white. It either works or it doesn't, or there's a possible fix to what isn't working. But I mean, this technology is it's insane technology. And like, you cannot ignore cryptocurrency. You can't ignore Bitcoin. It's being progressed. It's being developed so fast. And I feel like, everyone kind of has this thought that it's over, it's like the end of the world. I'm like, no, Bitcoin is Bitcoin's almost $9,000 still. This is insane. Last year, we were under $1,000 at the beginning of last year. So I think that we have a crazy future ahead. And with this progression of development and this massive moving forward movement with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general, I think that the price literally has to follow. It would be no other choice but for it to follow, since all this attention is being put towards it.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell my friends, my favorite thing to say is just to zoom out. People do think that it's the end of the world, and maybe that's what we call it. Whenever Bitcoin retraces a large amount, we just title it the end of the world. And that's human emotion, and that's how markets work. Like, there'll be a day where it's too late to buy Bitcoin. And these are the ones where you'll look back and really wish you cherished more, even if you're very aware and are cherishing them now. And that's just like how markets work, and it's the DNA of it all. It's why not everyone is a winner, right? But if this is the end of the world, then my world's ended 100 million times, and I'll laugh the next one just like I'm laughing now. Not a big deal.
Yeah, just people constantly buying the top and selling the bottom.
Yeah.
That's a lot of stuff you see on Twitter.
Better them than me, man.
Definitely. So trying to look at my notes real quick to see what we can go over real quick. So atomic swaps. I know we have the Lightning Network mainnet release as of recently, but something that works very close in proximity with Lightning Network is atomic swaps. It's a big dual development. So do you think that atomic swaps is going to be coming anytime soon? I know that you told me Charlie Lee or something about atomic swaps being entertained in the near future.
Yeah, so atomic swaps is actually like kind of a broad category. I think the one that people are really interested in are the atomic swaps over the Lightning Network and being able to atomically swap different cryptocurrencies. For example, Bitcoin, Litecoin. There's all sorts of types of atomic swaps. There's like submarine swaps where it's like half Lightning, half on chain almost. There's just full on chain swaps. There's full Lightning swaps. And I know personally that there's a lot of work going in. There's never enough work going in, but there are certainly devs that are spending majority of their time working on this type of stuff for the Lightning Network and a lot of advancements to the protocol itself. And I know that Charlie's working closely with Lightning Labs. He was just an investor in their latest round. So I would not be surprised if we start to see some atomic swap stuff going forward, or like AMPs. It's a recent idea that Lightning Labs published that can potentially involve Litecoin, where paying a Lightning invoice, making a Lightning payment can involve multiple cryptocurrencies. Instead of just using Bitcoin to buy a $5 purchase, you could use like $4 worth of Bitcoin and $1 worth of Litecoin, or all types of like really fancy, cool protocol advancements that I know people are working on today. So it's only a matter of time before, those start to rear its head to the public.
Exactly. And like, I think that when the market was up so high and the price was up so high, I feel like there were so many problems rising. Like Bitcoin transaction fees were expensive. You had Bitmain. I think that they were messing with the mining and stuff like that, causing these high transaction fees. But like, it seems like everything has settled. Everything is kind of like calm. Bitcoin transaction batching has started. I think Coinbase, I don't know if they started doing SegWit transactions, but it seems like they're moving towards these better things while the market is down, which is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, people can speculate all you want. I think one of the coolest characteristics of Bitcoin is it's battle tested. You know, there's no shortcuts in this game, and Bitcoin's taken every punch in between the eyes that it could possibly take, and it'll keep taking them and move on. So, and then to speak to the whole network stuff, I mean, it is funny how when people use the network and Bitcoin is getting a lot of attention and exchange volumes are high, it tends to get clogged. And when exchange volumes are low and people aren't trying to send transactions, things get cheap. I mean, that's just like the nature of a free market and dealing with something that, you know, space in a block is a scarce resource. So I don't think for anyone that was like well educated in the space, that wasn't a surprise. That's why things like Lightning Network is where I personally spend my time. So all of this, again, if you're like an OG or whatever people like to call it, you know, this is another day, another quarter, another dip, whatever in crypto.
It's always been the same repetitive issue, which is scaling. That's, I think, one of the biggest things that people are focusing on is how we're going to scale this worldwide. Because, you know, we had this market congestion when the price was up. But I think, don't you think that the batching of these transactions is a pretty good temporary solution, if you will?
Of course. The batching of transactions in SegWit is an amazing temporary solution. And, you know, that was kind of the pitch to the Bcash, Roger, Jihan side of all of this was that we don't have to make such a drastic, risky change and split the network, fork the network, and, you know, increase the block size, which could potentially do a lot of damage to the network. We have these temporary solutions. We can give engineers plenty of time to build out layered solutions and really scale this thing the right way, the safe way. And that was always the goal and the intention as far as I'm concerned. And it's worked out perfectly. You know, the socialized attacks that go on in Bitcoin as far as spreading misinformation and trying to confuse brands and stuff, you know, control what you can control. The solutions that the developers built for Bitcoin have been outstanding and have worked, you know, to a T. So, so far, so good.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like we're kind of reliant on the market makers and the merchants and the miners because they're the ones that kind of control what goes and what doesn't go, you know, so that we could reach consensus, right?
Yeah, I mean, like Bitcoin as this decentralized governance system and how to deal with this global currency where there's no real leader will forever be a challenge. But that's a perk. That's not like a bad thing.
That's the great part of it.
Exactly, right? That's the whole reason we're here. So yeah, of course, making updates to the network, trying to agree on roadmaps, trying to even decide why this thing is important in the first place. And even if we agree why it's important, what value props, you know, are of priority, you know, do we need to make fast payments at the cost of anything? Or do we need to stay censorship resistant at the cost of anything? Even those little details are really tough to solve and settle in a decentralized government system. So, but that's the beauty of it all, man. That's why we're here. It's one of the reasons this is all so important. So just a characteristic of the system, nothing special.
Well, it's like almost like some people like to make a negative out of something that's so positive. You know, these issues that arise with Bitcoin and Litecoin, just cryptocurrencies in general, I think that they're good issues. It's good to have because nobody controls it. We control it ourselves. And we always have to reach this consensus on what goes and what doesn't go. So,
of course, and it's even good that these people have these opinions and are able to express them. You know, like anyone can say whatever they want about any cryptocurrency. Your opinions are free. The friction and cost to get involved and express your opinion, whether that is online, whether that is by running specific software, by flagging, you know, for something as a miner, by signaling for whatever. I mean, all of that stuff, it's insanely, you know, cheap. The friction is very low to get involved. And that's, you know, the way we like it. This is not a system designed with any hierarchy, right? This is a system designed to have users be in control and voice their opinion in a totally decentralized system. So, I mean, as much as it pains me to like read Roger's feed sometimes, I mean, It's great, man. It's great that people can be in such disagreement. One guy can be so rich, and the guy commenting could be so poor, right, or whatever, and 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 that they both carry the same amount of weight, when they turn their node on. So I think it's great.
And their voice is heard. It's not about how much Bitcoin you have or how much money you have, and it's also like the community is still relatively small, although it's a massively growing community. And I guess it's slowed down a little bit because of the price going down of Bitcoin and Litecoin and crypto in general. But I mean, I think that the community is still small, and like there are so many more good people that have a goodwill for cryptocurrencies than that far outweigh the negative entities that are in this space trying to destroy what has been worked on for so long. I think that will always kind of there will always be a positive outlook and a positive side of things that will always win over people that try to destroy it, and we know who those people are. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, time heals all, man. Time heals all. That works in markets, and that works in communities and in governance. So I don't know. And Bitcoin actually is very efficient at curing these things as well. So, I mean, I personally don't even think Bcash is very relevant anymore. Not nearly as relevant as it was, 3 months ago. So it's always worked like that. It'll continue to work like that.
Yeah, I mean, and Bitcoin Cash is on GDAX or whatever, but there's literally no reason to have Bitcoin Cash whatsoever. And I'm trying to figure out, it's like, when are they going to drop the ball on it? When are they just going to stop trying so hard to do something that clearly is not working, and it's not progressing at all? And we know the tactics that the creators of Bitcoin Cash try to use to basically steer the vulnerable in the direction of Bitcoin Cash. We have people sending Bitcoin to Bitcoin Cash addresses. We have people that think that Bitcoin Cash is Bitcoin when it is not. I mean, when is the ball going to drop? When are people just going to realize and just, I mean, I don't know. What do you think of that?
Yeah, who knows? I think that it's kind of, I'm kind of like stuck in between, right? Because I would love it if, scammers or those that are trying to, influence with misinformation and with lies would, be put to rest almost, and like put down, or whatever. What did you just say? When is it going to end? I would love for it to end. But at the same time, that's a tricky game to play because, who's to tell who's a scammer, who's to tell who's a liar? How do you determine truth if you're not, doing math and compiling code, right? So exactly, it becomes like a really tricky political thing. So I think what's really important is that this industry continues to educate, regardless of how long it takes and how much it costs. Those that send Bitcoin to a Bitcoin Cash address paid, an expensive lesson to do so. And education will come. And that's what this system is based on. Like at the end of the day, as a user, you run code that you believe in and that, you want to use. And the general public needs to be educated and understand values and principles and what's going on for this system to work in the first place. It takes, individual education to a certain extent. So I don't know. I would love for it to end, but at the same time, I think it's more important that, users are educated and that, people are speaking up and voicing opinions and learning as this stuff goes on, I think is what's really important.
Yeah, I think the biggest accomplishment moving forward is not even just the development alone. It's the comprehension from the general public. How can we make it more easier understood to use this crazy technology that's so advanced? I think that's one of the biggest. Wouldn't you think that's one of the biggest things that we need to focus on is to allow people to understand it easier and use it easier?
Of course. Yeah, of course. I mean, everything between like, consumer, merchant, mainstream adoption stuff that I like to think about was ZAP, all the way to just like general education and, making sure that the global audience understands why Bitcoin is here or any cryptocurrency, why it's important, why it's valuable, and, what determines its success or failure. I mean, all of that is important. I remember I was on a panel very recently in Paris with Elise Colleen, who's a very close friend of mine, and she did a really great presentation on socialized attacks. and attacks that aren't necessarily like 51% attacks or any technical attack, but rather an attack socially on a community with misinformation and spreading values and beliefs that just aren't true or misguided. And, those are just as equally as dangerous as technical attacks, or potentially even more dangerous. So, I mean, it really is a really widespread community, everyone between protocol developers to people like yourself that have an audience and that, preach values and truth and talk to those looking to learn, all play a role in making sure that, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies succeed.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, of course, man.
Always putting good out there. So I wanted to go over a few questions that I just have of my own, just to think, just to hear your perspective on them. Because I came across an article recently from the creator of Twitter, and he thinks that Bitcoin is going to be the only currency, almost like a one world currency, which is an awesome way to think of it. We have we have 1,000 cryptocurrencies, over 1,000 cryptocurrencies, and we're always trying to think, which one is going to be the winner? Which one is going to be the largest and best? Like, is there really going to be a few currencies, digital currencies, or is there only going to be really one, like the Twitter creator thinks?
So I think that the idea that we have this like kind of global reserve currency, which is what Jack Dorsey was saying, I think that that's one of the long-term goals of Bitcoin as sound money in the first place, right? There's that really powerful quote that is, when voice is no longer sufficient, the most powerful action you can take is exit, and exiting the system. And Bitcoin holds our, global financial system and central banking and nation states with their fiat accountable. If we have this asset that can kind of underpin it and back an economy where, auditing is transparent, everyone has a copy of the ledger, censorship resistant, right? All of these characteristics and qualities that drew us to, this technology in the first place. So I think that idea is fascinating. I've always thought of that as a long-term goal and a really nice place for Bitcoin. So I agree with him. As far as like how many cryptocurrencies I think will survive, it's really tough to tell, man. I could tell you right now that not as many are out there. I think many, go to the Bayside and end up getting washed with the waves. I think there's a huge arbitrage on the trend right now. There's this general trend of blockchain and technology, and this is kind of like the next step of tech in general after the internet is now there's this blockchain stuff, and a lot of these, cryptocurrencies are just taking advantage and arbitraging a trend. But there's certainly room for multiple, right? I personally would put my eggs in Bitcoin. I wouldn't necessarily make a giant bet on any others surviving. I think hedging is fine. And there's certain cryptocurrencies that have value propositions that Bitcoin doesn't, and that have use cases and demand that Bitcoin doesn't. And I favor those like Litecoin, like Monero. But what's CoinMarketCap has hundreds of them. There's not going to be near that in, I don't know, 5-10 years. So that's my long-winded answer.
Yeah, and I think that cryptocurrencies aren't just going to be used for currencies in general. I mean, although they're called cryptocurrency, I think some other things can be used on the blockchain as well that can contribute to the primary outlook of this industry. But so moving to Litecoin and Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin has Lightning Network and Litecoin has Lightning Network, what's the reason to have Litecoin if you can just have Bitcoin? It does the same thing since it can scale better with this second layer.
That's a really good question. I could tell you one thing. A lot of the value propositions with the Lightning Network and the potential applications and all of these ideas, it's really unclear where the demand is going to be. We're still like really, really early on. You can easily see this being accepted with merchants and digital payments online being totally revolutionized and a lot safer, a lot more secure, a lot better user experience. You could totally see markets like online gambling being affected and being changed with the Lightning Network. You could totally see none of that happening and like financial markets being changed, right? When you have zero counterparty risk trade between two assets digitally and done in a secure way and in a peer-to-peer way to route around, you know, third parties and financial institutions, that could be a huge deal. To tell you the truth, though, it's really hard to tell. Right now, we're just trying to like onboard an industry, get them onto this network, build a healthy topology, build really secure, sound software underpinning it all, build consumer-facing applications to make sure people can use it, and in general, just scale out these blockchains so that no features are priced out. And you want to give developers and entrepreneurs and people a platform to build and be rewarded by, you know, creating value in the real world. And that's kind of like where we're at now, is this infrastructure step. So I get that question a lot, though, right? Is like, what do you think's like the killer app? Like, is Starbucks going to accept it? Or, you know, is the CME going to start allowing atomic swaps between assets that represent like the US dollar future and the yen future so that clearinghouses aren't involved in financial institutions? Do you think that the, you know, $1 trillion online gambling industry will be revolutionized with peer-to-peer wagers and people can bet in a private and secure way with each other on anything they want? You know, all of that stuff in reality could be really cool. It's up to, you know, the market and entrepreneurs to deliver the value and test it out. And we're kind of just trying to build out that infrastructure so that people can use it and people can build on it. So yeah, who knows? Long answer, but right now it's really hard to tell.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. It's kind of a far out question, and it's a really good question at that. I mean, it's a really honest question because we all wonder, you know, if we have Bitcoin and it can do the same thing Litecoin does, there's really no point of having Litecoin. But maybe it's just the road that we're on right now, where we currently stand, that Litecoin is more so a necessity, and it's a growing piece of the entire puzzle. Because I mean, I sometimes think to myself, I'm like, you know, Litecoin, maybe it has the first mover's advantage, and it probably will stick around and be used for smaller payments, whereas Bitcoin would be used for larger payments. But like I said, if Bitcoin could do the same thing as Litecoin with these development progressions that are going on with both of these coins, I don't really see an actual use or need for Litecoin. I really only see the actual need for Bitcoin.
Well, I mean, I can tell you as a speculator, it's important, you know, Litecoin's development team and some of the leadership displayed with Charlie and a lot of the guys involved over there. And then also, you know, its compatibility with Bitcoin and that it shares very similar code base is definitely a plus. Like I said before, it's really hard to tell the future, especially in this industry. So the fact that Litecoin is like the silver to Bitcoin's gold, as a speculator and as someone who maybe wants to hedge in a certain asset, so I'm not 100% all in on one, that's a very attractive, you know, valuable thing. And then also in particular to like Lightning and maybe use cases for Litecoin, if Bitcoin is this kind of like global asset that kind of underpins our economy and holds, you know, central banks and nation states accountable with this global ledger that we all have a copy of, Litecoin can easily turn into the asset that you spend, right? Like there's really, really cool tech that is going on where like AMPs, where I have like, instead of having like a $10 payment channel that I have to use to make a $10 payment, I could have 5 $2 channels, and 4 of those can be Litecoin channels, 1 can be Bitcoin. And I can make like, so if you can imagine like a ZAP interface where you can have like a slider that's like, when I make a payment, I would like to make 80% of payments in Litecoin and 20% in Bitcoin, right? Because I want to keep the store of value asset, you know, close to my chest, but I don't mind spending, you know, Litecoin at market and having that kind of flow through a more circular economy that's more consumer facing, right? Like you can do all types of really cool things like that. And, you know, is that going to be valuable? And is there going to be demand for that? I don't know. But the simple fact that Litecoin plays so well with Bitcoin as a speculator, and, you know, we're still so early, is definitely a good thing in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that Litecoin, as we all know, is usually the test net before something gets implemented to the big dog, which is Bitcoin. So I think that's also a huge bonus. Not just the fact that it could be used as payments, as it being silver to Bitcoin's gold, but like I said, you know, Litecoin is usually the guinea pig to Bitcoin, the the big dog,
Mhm.
right?
Yep, always has been and probably always will be.
Yeah, but it's a good thing. I think it's a why do something on Bitcoin straight away when it's not, perfected or whatnot. And it's something good to be used on Litecoin first and
Oh,
foremost.
sure. I think Litecoin had a significant role in UASF and SegWit and all of that, mental war that was going on back in the summer. I
And it was
think,
used as a hedge too.
yeah, I think it played a huge role. So you're not wrong.
Yeah, it's the second best cryptocurrency, which would be Litecoin, Bitcoin. And then, I mean, what are your thoughts? We haven't really talked about Ethereum before, and I don't really talk about Ethereum either, because it's like, it's an open source platform. There's so much good that could come out of this specific coin, but it wouldn't be used as a currency. I don't think it would ever be used as a currency because that's not its purpose. But what do you think of it, coexisting with Bitcoin and Litecoin that aren't really its competitors?
Um, I I have a few problems with Ethereum. Um, I do. I do. I'm usually very vocal about it. I don't try and hide anything. I think that Ethereum, in theory, is great. In theory, it sounds awesome, and putting things like Uber on a blockchain would be a perfect world, like playing a video game. In practice, there's a lot wrong with that. And I don't think that right now there's any real solutions or there's been any proof that any of that can succeed. These
Yeah.
type of DAP, decentralized applications, I don't think they scale. I don't think they're secure. And developing them is near impossible. There's impossible is not technically correct, so I can't technically say that, but as close to impossible as you can possibly get. The attack vectors on Ethereum, are way multiply any other cryptocurrency, that I'm aware of. There's so many, who knows? But yeah, I have some problems with ETH, and also like I was around for the pre-sale in those days, and the community in Ethereum has always really took into marketing it and kind of pitching a dream. And this market in general is like really uneducated. And they kind of like have used Bitcoin and its, whatever ties to, violence or drugs or terrorists or, all of the really false and ugly claims that Bitcoin has gotten along the road. I think that the community is like really of Ethereum is really irresponsibly piggybacked off of that and tried to take advantage of that to kind of position themselves against that. But yeah, there's no sound monetary policy. You're right. I don't see it used as any form of money. I think the applications don't scale. I have no problem with people working on it. I think it's a great idea in theory, and it's a fun hackathon type of thing. And if there are people that want to fund devs to try and hack away, then albeit. But do I think it should be worth hundreds of billions of dollars? Fuck no, not even close. So that's my opinion on Ethereum.
Well, I think, Ethereum just breeds negativity all the time. I mean, we're always hearing something negative coming from Ethereum. And like, I think one of the biggest issues with Ethereum is that you might be putting too much power in the community's hands with Ethereum, because anyone and everyone can develop this coin on the Ethereum platform, and it could be anything. It could be useless, and there's no controlling it and whatnot. I think that it's just a little bit too much power in the people's hands that can do a lot of negative things or bad intent.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to my point on just like we really need the community to be educated, because like I can go collect a bunch of toenails and ICO them and no one would buy it, right? With no product, or right? Like it would be a ridiculous offer.
Giving money away.
There's the equivalent of creating some shitcoin ERC20 token and trying to sell it. That's the equivalent of, getting a bunch of pieces of paper and offering them up. And people buy it just because they're largely uneducated and unsure of why this stuff is valuable in the first place. So is it like, too much ownership and power to certain developers, or is the market greatly uneducated? Probably a little bit of both. I side towards the uneducated market. I think that if someone tries to sell you something stupid, you just shouldn't buy it. And I do think the SEC should help protect you, and I think a lot of that stuff should be regulated.
Yeah.
But yeah, my real problem, I really could care less. My real problem is when that stuff ends up dragging down Bitcoin and,
Yeah.
giving Bitcoin a bad name, that, people are getting absolutely wrecked buying unregulated securities. And somehow that has anything to do with Bitcoin, which is the most sound money we've ever seen. It is my issue with it. A lot of the Ethereum community takes no responsibility and rather uses Bitcoin to market itself. So that's when I get a little ticked off.
Yeah, I would be bothered too. I mean, people look at cryptocurrencies as one thing. They look at Bitcoin and Ethereum as one and the same when they're not. They're completely different. Each cryptocurrency is completely different. I mean, a lot of them have piggybacked off of Bitcoin's code, but for the most part, each one is completely different. It has their own, flavor. It has their own thing, and a lot of them are the same. But Ethereum is just it's its own thing. You cannot compare Ethereum to Bitcoin in any way whatsoever, at all.
I agree. And to be clear, I'm not like subtweeting or talking anyone in particular. I'm talking very broadly about just the community as I see it. I know a lot of ETH people that I've enjoyed talking to at meetups and stuff, but no, I agree, man. I agree 100%.
And I have another question that's kind of like the question I asked you about why Litecoin when Bitcoin could do the same. And people think that Litecoin is a lot faster, but Litecoin is faster in a sense, but only really in the sense that it has 4 times the supply. It has all the development abilities as Bitcoin, and Bitcoin has all the development abilities as Litecoin. But it really just only has 4 times the supply. So it really, in a sense, maybe it's temporarily faster and it may always be faster than Bitcoin. But when you have these second layer protocols and these other developments that you're putting on these networks, it kind of deems Litecoin a little useless to an extent, other than the fact that we were just talking about how Litecoin is the test net to Bitcoin, which is important.
Right. Yeah. So Litecoin, like being faster on chain, is true, but the difference between a 10-minute confirmation and I think it's 2.5-minute confirmation on Litecoin, there really is no difference when you talk about user experience with merchants and consumers. I shouldn't have to wait any amount of minutes for a payment to be secure and sent, right? Or ideally, I have to wait 6 confirmations, anyways.
Yeah.
So you're correct. I don't know if it's a bad thing for Litecoin. I more look at it as a good thing for Bitcoin. Anyone can create competing cryptocurrencies. I think that the network effect in Bitcoin is so important. I don't speak Jack language and you don't speak Carson language, right? Like we speak English, and so Bitcoin has this network effect similar to language that money has always had for its history. And it will start to pick up a lot of these scaling features, privacy features, as it continues to stay alive and breathing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Other altcoins, I've never been particularly bullish on altcoins in general, like as a market. But like I said before, Litecoin certainly has a place personally as a speculator. We're so early that when you look at all the other options in the altcoin market, it certainly has a place in my portfolio because it's compatible with Bitcoin and it can coexist really easily with a lot of these second layer protocols and things of the such. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, Litecoin's still my biggest holding. I love Litecoin. I'm very loyal to it. That's the coin that I always talk about. That's what I grew my following base off of because it really is a great approach. Yeah, so I have one other question, and this is a pretty important question when it comes to developers getting paid. There's a coin out there called Dash. I'm sure you know what Dash is. And something that I've noticed about Dash that's actually really beneficial is that a specific percentage of all mine Dash goes to the development team for Dash. So they always have a fund to work off of for marketing, for hiring devs and whatnot. And I've noticed that in the community, you always see these coin developers or coins in general reaching out to fundraise a specific development or something like that because they don't have the money. Do you think that could be a problem that arises for Bitcoin or Litecoin in the future since they don't have this funding that maybe Dash does have? Not that I'm for Dash, but it is a good thing to think about.
No, I don't think so. I think that
Like, who's gonna pay
Bitcoin.
these people?
What's up?
Who's going to pay these people? These developers?
Well, I think that Bitcoin. I was just speaking on the network effect. It's very unique when you think about investing. When you think traditionally investing, like very West Coast Silicon Valley type investing, you think of these really large rounds raised for, tech unicorns like Twitter and stuff like that, and people like Mark Andreessen piling tens of millions of dollars into the next social media. For Bitcoin, it's a bit unique because what you can do is you can rather invest directly into development, with the returns coming from the asset itself. So if you're fairly confident that something like the Lightning Network will succeed, and if it does succeed, will drag the price of the underlying asset, which is Bitcoin, up, what you can do then is you don't have to invest in a specific company. You don't have to find, the next Steve Jobs and invest in Apple. What you can do rather is just buy a bunch of Bitcoin and then just invest in individual developers to make these protocols, progress faster, right? So I think that that's what happens is that, people that hodl Bitcoin, that own Bitcoin, that believe in Bitcoin, there's like a almost cult following for it. And they're individuals that are willing to protect it and stand for what they think Bitcoin represents. And, it's like a self, running loop is that Bitcoin goes up, the more people align with it, believe in it, buy into it, that generates more wealth. Wealth is being transferred from other, parts of the world into Bitcoin. That wealth is then reinvested into the Bitcoin ecosystem, into these developers, into, these companies, these businesses. And that generates, more value, which generates more wealth. And it kind of like loops itself. So I think, the fact that this is FOSS, free open source software, and that kind of the cypherpunk ethos to get involved, be the change you'd like to see in Bitcoin, don't wait for someone to pay you. And that, there's plenty of wealth creation and wealth being transferred over into the space, that there's a lot of incentive to invest in the underlying development to increase the value of the asset. I think is plenty. There doesn't need to be any ICOs or any individual team deciding where, block rewards go. I think that would be a bad thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of money in this space, and it's really not hard to find investors that want to invest in blockchain in general. So I see where you're coming from. It's kind of like a circulation effect from everyone that wants to have interest in this. And it is also the big pockets, the big money financial institutions and stuff like that. They all probably want to invest in specific people and stuff like that work for a team.
Yeah, and it's always just been interesting, though, that there's that small difference where, it would be the equivalent of buying pieces of the internet in the 90s. And then instead of, trying to pick a winner like Google versus Yahoo versus the other search engines, just kind of like throwing money at devs to just build like, search functionality, period. And it didn't matter who won because you own parts of the internet. So if the internet became this kind of like, global information system that was searchable and accessible from anywhere, you'd be a winner. It didn't work out like that. You kind of had to be a smart investor and get to know founders, get to know the ecosystem. With Bitcoin, it is like that. You can buy pieces of this asset with the giant bet that it will become something big and succeed. And then you can kind of throw money at this open source development, and open source development is much healthier than, closed source, competing companies and stuff like that. So I've always thought that part was very fascinating, and I think it's really accelerated Bitcoin's growth to this date and will continue to, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. So yeah, I have a quick question. It's from the audience in the live stream, and they asked something about the ZAP wallet. When is ZAP wallet going to get the Lightning Network? And also just in general, talk about the ZAP wallet. I know that you're the primary, if not the only developer of the wallet. I'd love to hear some updates and whatnot.
Sure. Yeah. So we're going to roll out basically an entire new app. It'll look different. It'll feel different. And it's all based on user feedback. And we're learning why people like Lightning, why they want to use it, what they're using it for, and how they're using it. And all of that feedback is, being taken in a public matter on chats and on Twitter and stuff like that. And we're going to release a totally new app. The reason we do not have a mainnet release yet is because the Lite client that is built with Lightning Network in mind, which was built by the Lightning Labs team, who also builds LND, that mainnet you just saw released, that beta. That is not quite ready. So these Lite clients are needed because you don't want the responsibility of running a full node for your everyday consumer. So those running, Lightning nodes on their cell phone and, acting as a consumer to merchants online, or those running on their laptop. You do not want a full node to be required for that user experience. You would much rather have a Lite client. And I think it's BIP 157 and BIP 158 got merged in and are being worked on for Bitcoin Core. There's BTCD, Roast Beef's fork supports it already, and there's already an implementation called Neutrino. So that type of consumer-facing stuff where you'll see like Lightning ZAP on the iOS store and ZAP for mainnet downloadable on your desktop is coming for sure. But the reason it's not there yet is because there's still a bit of work to do for consumer-facing protocol stuff for the Lightning Network, in particular Lite clients and a few other protocol features.
So it's just a constant progress. There's big things coming for it. There is a lot of focus being done on it. And there's big things to come, not just for Lightning Network, but for ZAP. Are you still the only developer for ZAP, or do you have other people helping and contributing to it?
So we now have, I think, 20 contributors in the GitHub, and there's one other maintainer who's become a very close friend of mine. He's a very active contributor. And we've kind of started to take on multiple projects. So we're working on mobile as well now, and I plan on diving into protocol stuff myself personally, hopefully, with some of this Lite client stuff. So it's getting there, right? Like just like Bitcoin in the early days, there were a few contributors, and then those doubled, and then those doubled, and so it's been fun to watch it grow. But I'm not the lone wolf anymore, which is a good thing.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'm really happy to hear that things are growing, and they're just growing rapidly. It won't slow down. It's just going and going and going.
Yep. Parabolic. Price will follow.
Absolutely. Well, it was awesome to have you on here today, Jack. It's always nice to have you on the show. Thank you for your insight. Of
course, dude. You can hit me up anytime. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. All right, I'll talk to you soon.
All right, buddy.